You're listening to Protecting What Matters by the Ohio Department of Commerce. Commerce is Ohio's chief regulator, and we play a vital role in keeping you safe by protecting your property, your money, and some of the products you use every day. This is designed to bring awareness to important issues and help educate consumers and businesses. Join us as we chat with trusted industry experts focused on providing you with the tools you need to help you protect what matters most in your life.
Due to the fact that more scams in the U.S. are started on social media than any other platform in recent years, our 20 to 29-year-olds are becoming a huge target too.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of Protecting What Matters. We have entered a new year here, but financial fraud and identity theft continues to be a major issue for consumers across the country and also here in Ohio. I'm Jamie Crawford, Public Information Officer for Department of Commerce's Division of Financial Institutions, and joining me today is Viktoria Jurkovic, the division's Consumer Affairs Manager. We're going to fill you in on everything you need to know about the top consumer frauds that are trending out there and what you can do to protect yourself from falling victim to them. Viktoria, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
So let's just start things off. The Federal Trade Commission recently issued a report that said consumers across the country lost about $10 billion to various frauds in 2023. Ohio itself ranked 26th in the country with $154 million in losses to Ohioans last year. Those are pretty staggering figures, aren't they?
It is. It's pretty alarming. And I think overall, we understand how detrimental it is, but I don't think people realize just how much money is actually lost in fraud and identity theft.
Well, let's just go ahead and dig into that a little more. Let's take a look at the overall snapshot of that consumer fraud report that the FTC put out last year, and let's look at things on a national level. What were the top instances of fraud that we saw in the report?
So we're looking at top three things: imposter scams, online shopping and negative reviews, and then prizes, sweepstakes, lottery scam. Specifically with the imposter scams, I mean, there was 853,900 and some scams reported by the FTC, and 21% of those were actually reported a dollar loss. So we're looking at like 2.7 billion that were lost to imposter scams last year. And with the online shopping, we're looking at a number of around 370,000 reports with a almost $400 million loss. So these top scams, I mean, they just drain people's accounts, and there are so many intricacies when it comes to imposter scams and when it comes to online shopping. I mean, when you think of the online shopping risks, folks are visiting bogus websites, or they're shopping on unsecured websites. And so we just want to make sure that we explain what these scams are, what are some things to look out for, and just how it hones in from a national and then eventually a state level.
Now let's dig a little more into imposter scams. How do they work, and what can you do to minimize your chance of becoming a victim to them?
So imposter scams they vary and they can be tricky. And the reason why is because what they're really trying to do is a scammer or fraudster, if that's the preferred term you would like to use, are trying to gain trust when they are operating in this segment. So they're going to act like a financial institution. So it could be a bank or a credit union. They're going to pretend that they're a government official, Social Security, Medicare, IRS. And then sometimes imposter scams can take on a version of a grandparent scam. So the imposter is going to pretend to be a grandchild or a grandniece or nephew. Imposter scams can also involve pretending to be a reputable business and even tech support. And so what their goal is to prey on a vulnerable person despite their age or where they're from, and use sophisticated tactics designed to deceive and evoke some sense of urgency and fear.
Have authorities taken any actions to sort of try and tackle this problem? And if so, how do consumers access those tools?
So the FTC has recognized the need for additional consumer awareness, specifically even the beginning of the end of last year and the beginning of this year. And the reason why is because they have always put out this consumer report. And I think they've recognized that, consumers aren't reading that report. I mean, it's lengthy, it's detail oriented, and not your everyday person's going to be like, you know what, I'm going to go to FTC's website and read their consumer report about fraud and identity theft. So I think they've recognized that and started to implement some outreach efforts on their end. The CFPB has always been a strong advocate for educating the public on financial fraud. And then we specifically within the Office of Consumer Affairs have really spent a large portion of the last 3 years educating on the different types of financial scams that affect Ohioans. And we regularly speak to the media on how Ohioans are targeted and ways that they can protect their hard-earned money. So I think that overall, a lot of the agencies understand and recognize the need. I mean, just by the billions lost to scams and identity theft. And we've been doing our part in trying to educate specifically during a time that is, Consumer Protection Month, awareness, and things like that.
It's a really good way to start the conversation here. Stay tuned because right after a quick break, we're going to take a closer look at what consumer frauds affected Ohioans the most last year.
It's your money, come and claim it. The Ohio Department of Commerce Division of Unclaimed Funds is safeguarding nearly $4 billion in unclaimed funds. So there's a good chance you or someone you know has money waiting to be claimed. Just head over to our website, unclaimedfunds.ohio.gov, to search for your name, the name of a family member, or a loved one to see if you have an unclaimed fund.
Thanks for listening to Protecting What Matters. I'm Jamie Crawford, Public Information Officer for the Department of Commerce's Division of Financial Institutions, and I'm speaking today with the division's Consumer Affairs Manager, Viktoria Jurkovic, about the top trendy consumer frauds that are out there and how you can protect yourself. So, Victoria, we mentioned in the last segment that Ohio ranked 26th across the nation for instances of consumer fraud last year in that report. But there were some segments where our state actually registered pretty high across as compared to other states. What were they?
So while fraud reports only rose by about 4,000 from 2022 to 2023, the financial losses did skyrocket by almost 14%. So that's a substantial increase. What was a huge issue with Ohioans in 2023 was identity theft. It was about a quarter of the total reports that were registered for Ohioans. It seems to be, unfortunately, a growing problem in Ohio. And it's just really concerning as somebody that educates on identity theft and scams and other financial literacy education, where we need to change our messaging or improve our preventative measures for these folks.
So identity theft, you hear about that a lot, but what's considered identity theft, and are there specific types that we should be really concerned about?
So identity theft can be complicated. It's very hard to prevent to the various ways that a scammer can obtain your personal and or your financial information. So specifically, they could, steal your name and address, or they can gain access to a credit card or bank account number. And that could be from, a skimming machine on a gas pump, or it could be you were involved in a data breach of some sort. So those numbers, they don't have to physically have your card. All they need is those physical numbers. So those are some incidences of where identity theft plays a part. The other thing that's really important for folks to know is if that social security number lands in the wrong person's hands, that could also cause some identity theft issues. And then even things like medical insurance numbers, those can be a problem for folks. So when you have any part of your personal or financial information that can buy items with, your credit card or obtain new credit in your name. They can open any type of account in your name, steal your tax refund, use your health insurance to get medical care. They can even pretend to be you if they were arrested. So these are all ways that scammers gain access to your identity and then perform fraud on your behalf. Some of the things that I do want to mention when it comes to Ohioans is that the top 3 types of identity theft that affected them in 2023 were those that were geared around government and benefits information. So to me, that I assume a lot of times, access to tax refunds. that are not yours. I think that's a huge problem. And I know that the IRS has put and implemented some tactics to help prevent from somebody filing a tax return on your behalf. And then credit card fraud. Credit card fraud, I think, continues to be an issue. And I think the reason why is because we tend to be a little looser with our credit card because of the added protections that there is in place. For instance, if I used a debit card and my information was stolen, it would automatically be withdrawn from my account. And then a bank or financial institution might take several months to recoup funds if I prove it was a scam. Where a credit card, you're more likely to retain your funds a lot quicker, and almost all of them in entirety. So I think sometimes people think, well, I have a credit card, it has those protections, so I don't have to take in some other preventative measures. And I think that's what we kind of need to focus on for folks, is what are those preventative key factors to prevent fraud and identity theft.
And so, identity theft, it can affect anyone, impact anyone. But I guess if I want to drill down a little bit on how it might impact, some of the more vulnerable parts of our population, specifically older people, should they be aware, what should they be aware about when it comes to identity theft?
So what I did notice on the FTC report, it did seem that the fraud and identity theft issues that really plague a lot of our elderly has kind of slowed down, but I really don't think that's because they're not being targeted. I think it's because they're embarrassed to file or embarrassed to tell folks, report it to the FTC and other, even family members. So there's a lot of factors of why the older population continues to be a target. And a lot of it has to do with their loneliness. They're a lonely population. They look for companionship. It is more likely that they would find a friend or a romantic partner via online or, through other means than any of the other age groups. The other thing is that they do experience cognitive decline. So that is something that folks have to think about. Your adult parent or your grandparent is just not mentally quick and aware and can fall quicker to a scam due to just not being there and on a mental side, mental thought process. And then they actually are a target because of the fact that they usually tend to have greater investments. So there's more money behind them. And to a scammer, it's like, I'm going to hit hard with the larger amount versus, the younger folks. But I will say, due to the fact that more scams in the U.S. are started on social media than any other platform in recent years, our 20 to 29-year-olds are becoming a huge target too. And the reason why I think, for the most part, and just from looking at the data, is 20 to 29-year-olds love to share their private lives on social media, and they are quick to do it too. And they want to be friends with everybody. Because you have to remember, this generation, companionship was found online, more even so, especially during the COVID period, than in person. So they're quick to accept friend requests. They're quick to send money when someone says, hey, you owe me money, and they utilize some peer-to-peer app. And they also are, that generation, that time in their life where, they are a little bit riskier. So they're not afraid to, look into crypto, look into some of these investments, look into that kind of stuff. But they go about it by getting their education from social media, influencers, versus maybe I should reach out to an agency that, has information on reputable financial advisors or folks at my bank that could work with me. So I think that we have a younger population that's a target and our older population, and obviously all those in between. But those are really the two top ages that we look forward to educate more on.
Let me follow up a little bit about that topic on the younger people. Do you think that our younger population needs to scale back on social media, based on that being where most of this identity theft is taking place? And how do they safeguard themselves?
So I always educate on, you need to be sure that you're protecting yourself in person and digitally. And so I really think that our younger audience has to pay attention to the digital footprint side of things. They, like I mentioned earlier, they're more likely to use a peer-to-peer payment app or a money transfer app than any of the other ages. And they tend to shy away from the credit cards because of that factor. And I did mention how credit cards do have greater protection. And we always advise folks when they are shopping, specifically online, to utilize a credit card versus other means of money. But I think that with the younger age bracket, not only are they utilizing social media and accepting a lot of friend requests, but they're also shopping via these social media platforms, because reputable businesses can take out a social media ad. They can even have the capability of an e-commerce connection where you can actually buy directly through them, through that social media app. So folks, I mean, this younger audience likes to click through and they like to buy things right off the bat, and in the cart it goes. And the problem is that although a reputable business could have a social media ad, a scammer can also take out a social media ad. There's no way for Meta or any of those other big, large corporations that own these types of social media platforms to really target, if scammers are doing these things. So that is where we have to remind our younger audience to slow down a bit, maybe not accept every friend request you get, maybe really thoroughly examine who it is, because it's not unlikely for a scammer to replicate a friend, put together a false social media account, then target that friend list or that specific person. And that's where we get into a plethora of our imposter scams. And we just need to really educate the younger kids on how to safely use those platforms and how to safely use peer-to-peer apps as well.
Certainly a lot of important information there to consider. We're going to take one more quick break here. And on the other side, we're going to talk about ways that consumers can protect themselves against these various types of fraud and what sort of tools are out there.
Thanks for listening to Protecting What Matters from the Ohio Department of Commerce. We are your resource for all safety information for your home or business. Here's a quick safety message reminder from the Ohio State Fire Marshal's office.
So smoke alarms, we want to make sure we're putting those on each level of the house. Each bedroom that you're at, where anybody sleeps, put that inside that bedroom, and then outside where the people sleep. They're important because what you typically have is that early activation, early notification of something happening, in this case smoke building up, and that usually is what tells you that there's a fire happening. So having those placed in those locations that are appropriate, making sure that you're checking the alarms themselves about once a month just to make sure that they're working. Change the batteries on them. We like to say twice a year right now. And then after 10 years, those entire alarms are going to need replaced.
For more information on the State Fire Marshal, visit our website at com.ohio.gov/fire. And be sure to check out some of our previous podcast episodes on all podcast platforms.
Welcome back to Protecting What Matters. I'm Jamie Crawford, and joining me today is Consumer Affairs Manager Viktoria Jurkovic with the Division of Financial Institutions. So Victoria, we've been talking a lot about the various types of consumer fraud that are lurking out there. What can our listeners at home do to help protect themselves?
So what Ohioans should regularly think about doing is reviewing their financial statements and especially their credit reports. They want to look for any unauthorized transactions or maybe unrecognized accounts, even something on their credit report like an address change. That should be alarming to them. And any of those things can indicate potential identity theft. You can actually obtain a free weekly credit report through annualcreditreport.com. And I always chuckle a little bit when I say this now because, in the past, we used to say, get your free annual credit report. And now, because of COVID, they've actually changed it where you can actually obtain it weekly for free. So always advise folks to regularly check that. And in addition to reviewing your credit reports, you might even want to consider implementing a credit alert or freeze. There is a distinction between the two. With an alert, it's just going to do what it says. It's going to alert you, but it's a little bit easier because you only have to contact one of the top 3 credit bureaus. So you're thinking about Experian, Equifax, or TransUnion. And so it's a little bit quicker for folks. The things that I like to say when you're trying to decide if an alert or a credit freeze is appropriate is that although it's going to take more time for a credit freeze because you have to individually contact them, which is easily done online, the freeze is going to really inhibit a scammer from taking out a new line of credit in your name. So that's where it really stops it. Because what happens is that when your credit is frozen, if a lender or a company were to try to do a hard credit check, they wouldn't be able to do it because it's basically blocked. So that's why I always kind of recommend folks look into credit or security freezes because it will save you and add an extra preventative measure in that. And it's really not that hard and it doesn't take up that much time.
What other tips or preventive measures should we take when it comes to fraud and identity theft?
So you want to make sure that you're protecting personal documents, and we're even talking about old school mail. Mail boxes are getting, tampered with regularly, and it's just an ongoing issue. But what I like to hone in on is the mail that you receive in your own mailbox at home. After you look through your mail and you decide what I need to save, what I need to put away, or what needs to just be thrown away, what are you actually doing with that? We shouldn't just be tossing it because it could end up in the wrong person's hands. We want to make sure that any personal information on those on that material that you receive in the mail is blacked out. There's really cheap blackout rollers and stamps that you can get online, or shredding is also a very good option to do so. If you don't have a personal shredder, I know a lot of communities like to put together shredding events, so that's always something that you can look into as well. I think it's also critical that people really have long, unique passwords for each individual financial or personal account, and that you regularly update it every few months. And a lot of people will say, this is so tedious. I have so many passwords to remember. I have work passwords and personal passwords, and I can't keep track of it all. But honestly, the amount of work that you will put into remembering passwords or having to assign yourself a new password, it will outweigh the amount of time you will spend if you are a victim of identity theft or a scam. So I always want to keep people aware of that. And you also just want to be skeptical of any unsolicited communication, whether that is via mail or the email or text messages. Text messages, schmishing is the term. It's like phishing, but for your text. It runs rampant, and it affects folks. Not only these scammers don't only pretend to be like a financial institution, they're pretending to be, the post office or another type of mailing company. And so people are regularly shopping on sites consistently. So it's not unlikely for them to get tripped up and be like, oh, wait, is that for me? And click on it. And then, you open up a link that you probably shouldn't have.
And what about Social Security numbers? What should we be doing in that space to protect ourselves from?
So with Social Security numbers, obviously you want to make sure that if you do have a Social Security card that is around and available, put it in a very safe place. You don't necessarily even have to have your Social Security card on you ever, but what I like to remind folks about Social Security numbers is you don't necessarily have to give it away if you really don't have to. And the reason why I say this is if you're filling out paperwork at an office or you're filling out paperwork for something of some sort that you maybe want to apply to or you want to have down the road, you want to even ask the folks that are giving you that form to fill out, why do you need it? That's something you want to ask them. You also want to ask them, how are you going to protect this information? Because unfortunately, data breaches are a problem. It happens regularly. And sometimes you don't even know it happens to you until 3 months down the road. And so you want to ask those questions. You also want to say, can I use a different way to identify myself? Or if you are adamant that I have to have a Social Security number of some sort, can I just use the last 4 digits? Is that possible? Never be afraid to ask folks why they need that information. It's a preventative measure you can take. It also makes the person you're working with know I am somebody that's really conscientious of the information I'm giving out.
I know we're running out of time here, but let me just ask you real quickly. We've been talking about the various types of consumer fraud that are out there. The division has a program in place that awards grants to programs teaching financial literacy and to children and young adults here in Ohio. Can you tell us a little bit about that program?
Yeah, so we have a financial literacy grant program that is facilitated through the Division of Financial Institutions. Every year between the beginning of February to the end of April, organizations, schools, colleges can apply to our grant funds, and it's a lengthy process of establishing what type of financial literacy program that you can implement in your community or for your students. But it's really we have a lot of information on our website about it, and it's really important that we're able to touch different areas of the state because unfortunately the Office of Consumer Affairs can't be everywhere. So we really utilize this program to really get in the local communities, working with the local community or working with students in the local community. We award about $50,000 to $75,000 yearly, and it's on a fiscal basis. So if you apply for a grant before the deadline of April 30th and an evaluation panel chooses you, then your grant fund would start July 1 of this year and go until June 30th of 2025.
Important program. Thank you. And thank you, Victoria, for joining us today. That was it was really helpful and informative. And I just want to make a reminder that the Office of Consumer Affairs provides a variety of information and resources with a goal of providing consumers like you with tools essential to make smart financial decisions. You can visit the Department of Commerce's website at com.ohio.gov. That's com.ohio.gov. And then go to the Division of Financial Institutions section. That will also includes the Office of Consumer Affairs. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll talk to you next time.